thank you all for coming to listen to me. I'll start off to tell you that I was born in Poland. My father and mother were farmers. My grandparents were farmers and uncles were farmers in Poland. My father and mother had 7 daughters and 2 sons. After the daughters got older, they decided to move to a city called Radomish, where they could possibly find Jewish spouses, where they bought a beautiful, big, huge home. It was next to the public school and where I was born. When I was born in Radomish, I grew up in a very lovely environment. I was spoiled rotten. My sisters were very cheerful, very happy. They were always singing and enjoying and everything. It was a wonderful time. When I got to be 5 years old, I attended public school, which was next door, and I attended Hebrew school. I grew up during the time where Hitler was elected in 1937. A lot of German Jews, hungry from France and Belgium and Holland, arrived in Radomish and decided to tell the people what the atrocities already happened in Germany. And every time they huddled with my family and talked, I tried to listen in because I could see on their faces they were very upset. And they told me, go and play, and they didn't want me to listen to that. This continued for quite a while. In 1939, the Germans declared war against Poland, and after a while, they approached the city of Radomish, and we heard them. But my father and mother, my youngest sister and I went to the basement, and we stayed there for a period of time, because after a while, you could see the German Wehrmacht, who were wearing steel-plated boots. You could hear them from a long distance. So when they approached close to the house, my father and I went upstairs, and my father said something to the soldier, and one of the soldiers beat my father up. You don't want to see your father getting beaten up. It was very tragic for a young boy like me to see your father getting beaten up, and that was the beginning. After that, the regular army, the German regular army left, and the SS came in with the Gestapo. The SS joined, volunteered to eliminate the Jewish people, and so did the Gestapo. For that, they didn't have to go to war, and that was their function. They announced that all Jewish people 13 years of age or older have to wear a Star of David. I, being younger than that, so I didn't have to wear that. And the city of Radomish was situated with a circle of marketplace in the middle of the town. And there were SS people, Orthodox Jewish people in Europe and even here, were wearing facial hair, and the SS took out matches and burned their hair, and they were screaming, and it was hurting, and they beat them up, and some of them even killed, whatever. It was tragic to see how cruel they was already happening at that particular time that they came in. After a while, the Gestapo came in, went into every house, and announced, if you have anything of any value whatsoever, surrender. But if you didn't, they will kill you. But they also searched everywhere, anywhere, and took everything that was of any value whatsoever from the house. Furs, money, silver, gold, whatever, even liquor, they took away. After a while, things got worse because there was a lot of killing going on, a lot of people I could see that was sad and everything else. One day they announced that any Jewish man 18 up to 21 should gather in the hall, which wasn't very far from my house. And amongst them, my brother was elected to be there. I knew he was there. It was very quiet in town, and I wanted to see where he was or what happened. So I took my bike and I drove there. 2 Gestapo men in leather jackets and coats, whatever they were wearing, yelled out, "Stop," and I didn't. And they took the guns out to shoot me. My brother saw it in the window and yelled out, "Please," that's my brother, "let him go, please let him go," and they let me go. That was the beginning of the atrocities, and we knew something else was going to happen. The adults knew. A few days later, a lot of SS people arrived in town. Some of them were wearing black uniforms. The SS people in black uniforms were from Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, who joined the SS people to eliminate the Jews. The German SS people were wearing great uniforms, so you could distinguish them. There was a bunch of trucks in town, and I walked around and I saw one particular truck. There was standing white truck with a huge window in the back, and I was wondering why there would be a window in a truck, but I couldn't find out. Things got very bad. Everybody was very subdued. That day I remember that something was going to happen. At that night, my father and mother hired a gentleman with a horse and wagon. That was the only transportation we had. At 12 midnight, they told my sister and I to get dressed, and my father and mother went on the wagon, and we drove to a city called Tarnów, where my older sister and her son, my nephew and brother-in-law, lived in a ghetto. We arrived there. We stayed there for a period of time. Things were very, very bad as far as food is concerned. It was very hard to obtain. And the atrocities that they heard, the adults, was very sad. And somehow my brother-in-law got in touch with a gentleman who was communicating with my sisters, unknown to me. But after a while, he came out with a gentleman. And my brother-in-law said to my sister and I, "You're going to put on the coat and the jackets, and you're going to go on a trip. You got to be quiet. You can't cough or sneeze or do anything." And while we got dressed and everything and ready to go out, I yearned so bad to say goodbye, and I could see my father and my mother and my sister at the crack of the bedroom door open. And I couldn't even say goodbye to them. And up to this day, I remember it was tragic. And we were put on a truck, covered completely with canvas, and we went through the gates. The SS stopped the truck and asked him what he has, and he said nothing. And we approached a place called Smoczka, where we met my 3 sisters there. They were sent to the camp, which was a German army camp. While we arrived there, I was told to work and help build roads. As a young guy, I was very strong, and I tried very hard to survive. So I worked very hard. The camp was situated in the middle of the forest. And after a while, you could see the Gestapo come in and take people out that weren't able to work or they were sick or something wrong. And they took him into the forest and you could hear the shots. On one particular day, they came in and they picked me out, amongst others, to be shot. The foreman came over and said, I'm a good worker, let him go. So he let me go and took the other ones in the forest and shot them. I worked there in Mielec for 1 year. The food we had was twice a day bread and margarine and soup during the course of the day. On one day, one of the soldiers was riding a horse and the horse broke a leg. And they shot the horse and they gave us meat. Through the course of the time that we were there, about a year, the only time we had meat is the one from the horse. After 1 year, we completed the construction of the roads. They told us all to line up in the center of the camp. And they took us on trucks and took us to a place called Mielec. Mielec was a camp, a concentration camp, that was, prior to the war, established for a factory of airplanes. After the war came out, the Germans took over and they brought people in from different cities to Mielec. So when we arrived in Mielec, we had to line up, and there was a German assessment sitting on a table with a wooden stick and a nail in it and cotton around it and ink. And he told us to pull our hands, and he put KL on us, which stands for Konzentrationslager or concentration camp, tattooed us. My hand swelled up from infection. After a while, it healed. So after a while, we had to stay and wait and see what's happening. Then the engineers came in and selected people to work for them. In Mielec, they repaired airplanes that were shot down by the Russians. I was assigned to work in the offices, cleaning the offices and being available for anything that they wanted me for, doing different chores and so forth. I worked there in the Versand, they called it. On many occasions, I found scraps and I took it and ate it. After being there a few days, I discovered my brother was there. So I got in touch with him, and he was telling me all the Jewish people from the city of Radlamish were eliminated. He and the other ones were taken to a place and dug graves. And he says they dug the graves, they brought mothers, older, disabled, whatever, with little tiny little babies. They took their heads and hit them against the wall and killed them. The mothers got very frantic, screaming and howling. So they told them to line up in front of the grave, mass grave, and they shot him. And the boy's duty was to bury him. My brother said some of them weren't even dead, and they had to bury him. It was horrible, he said. And then all of a sudden, he says, a truck came in with a huge glass window in the back. And they had people stacked that they couldn't walk or were disabled or had problems. And they stacked them in the truck, and they hooked up the exhaust system and poisoned them and brought them to be buried. In Mielec, life was horrible. People were dying of typhus and all other disease. We had no facilities of getting any medication or any doctors or anything. I remember at one time I went and I had a tremendous toothache, and I asked if there was a dentist that can help me. And there was one Jewish dentist, but he had no equipment. And I told him I had a toothache, and he says, I don't have any equipment, but he searched and found somebody with a pair of pliers, and he pulled my tooth. Up to this day, I can't imagine how much pain a person can endure if you have no choice. I still have a scar here from my tooth pulling. I worked in Mielec for 1 year. We were very lousy. We had no facility to shower or washing or doing anything. We wore the same clothes over and over again. Life in Mielec consisted of bread and margarine and soup during the day. I worked in Mielec for 1 year. We were separated from the sisters, from the women. And one day they announced that all men should gather in the center of the camp. And we did. And they put us on a truck and took us to a place called Mielec. Mielec was a very short distance from Auschwitz. And when we arrived in Mielec, the intention of theirs was to take us to Auschwitz. But there were so many trains lined up with Jewish people in trucks, and they told us that we have to stay in Mielec for a while. We didn't know how long, because Auschwitz was working at its capacity to poison the people. After a while, they decided there was a place not very far away called Flossenbürg, Germany. Flossenbürg, Germany was a concentration camp for German political prisoners and homosexuals. So they decided that they put up barracks, and since we were very knowledgeable preparing airplanes, they decided that they're going to put us over there. They announced that we all stand up in the center of the camp and get undressed, and they gave us striped uniforms and a hat and a pair of shoes, wooden shoes. We were lined up. Some people were put a red mark in the forehead with a T, and some people were selected to go and work in different places. The people with the T on the forehead, the T stood for told, for death. They took him and shot them. My brother and I were selected to work in Flossenbürg, amongst other ones. And we came to Flossenbürg, where we put in the barracks. The beds were 3 stacks up. My bed had consisted, or our bed consisted of straw mattresses and pillows and a blanket. We were told the next few days to line up, and we were selected to work in the different places. I was selected to work in a place where I worked for an engineer to construct parts of airplanes, pieces to replace in a hurry. I also did some different chores like getting parts and different things. We received bread and margarine and soup in a day. I remember one day I was sitting and eating my soup, and there was an acquaintance from the city that was sitting across from me, and he fished out a human finger from his soup. And I was wondering if he's going to eat it, but I turned my head, and I don't know if he did or not. In Flossenbürg, we were so lousy, We had no facilities of washing or do anything at all. People were beaten up, people were hurt. On one occasion I was told to go to a different department to get some parts by the engineer. And when I came back, the foreman didn't ask any question, told me to lay down on a pedestal, and he gave me 27 lashes on my back. I came back and I cried, and the engineer asked me why, what happened, and I told him. And he just shrugged his head. On many occasions, I had cleaning offices, and I found pieces of bread or any other things that I could consume, and I shared it with my brother. So after a while, we were treated like animals. We had to get up in the morning when the lights came on. We had to go to sleep when the lights went off. People were beaten up. People were dying from disease. At one particular time, there were 4 people from a different barrack that dug underneath the electric fence and got across to run away. But the SAS people on the tower saw him doing that. So they shot him. For a penalty, they went into the barrack where they escaped the people, and they took 10 people out and brought him to the center of the camp and asked us all to line up to watch. They hung him for a penalty of not telling the people, the Germans, that they were escaping. Life in Flossenbürg was horrible. The Germans, prisoners, didn't have to work. The homosexuals didn't, and neither Jews alone had to work. It was at one time the idea of the Germans to kill all the Jews with no question whatsoever. But after then, Eichmann decided, who was in charge of eliminating the Jews, that if we separate the Jews from the men, from the women, there will be no offspring, and they will die, and we get free labor. Flossenbürg, I worked for 1 year. 1 year they told us all to line up, and they put us on trucks, on railroad trucks. There was freight trucks. And the engines proceeded for a short distance of time, the locomotives for the American Air Force wasn't very far away, and they saw the SS guards and the engine going somewhere, so they shot at the engine. And also we had casualties. I remember a friend of mine had a bullet go through here and came out. I never saw him again. After disabling the locomotive, they brought another locomotive in. Again, the Air Force of the United States saw that, and they disabled the locomotives. After doing that, they decided to take us off the train. We didn't get any food, and we were told to line up, and we did. The only thing I saw was a horse and wagon full loaded with food and stuff, and 2 other ones empty. But I figured maybe they took some food for us. It was cold, it was winter, and they told us to go on a march. And we went on a march, and we went and walked, and people developed blisters on their legs, and feet were swollen. My brother's feet were swollen. Anybody that couldn't walk was shot right there and put on the wagons. I constantly dragged my brother and begged him to keep going because he wanted to fall back because his legs were swollen. We walked and walked for day and night. We didn't get any food. And they took us into a forest. When we arrived in the forest, they told us to line up with the purpose of being shot. But after a few seconds or moments, I don't remember, a German officer from the regular army with one arm came from somewhere and called them, and all the SS people stood there and he was telling them something. And after a while, they disappeared. And while they disappeared, we stood there in awe. We didn't know what to do. So my brother and I saw a pig farm very short distance away. And we approached the pig farm, and we were so hungry, we took our hands and picked up food from the trough, pig food from the trough, and ate it. The German lady in the house saw us doing that. She threw bread at us, and we ate it. After we finished eating, we found a haymow, and we went to sleep on top of the straw overnight. When we got up, we found out that the American soldiers were a very short distance away. So we walked there, and when we arrived, I saw the American soldiers, but I could not speak English. So I asked if there was any Jewish soldiers that could speak Jewish, Polish, or German. They couldn't find very easily till they found one Jewish soldier who could speak Yiddish, Jewish. And we talked to him. He gave me a pair of pants and a shirt and a pair of shoes. And he opened a can of jam, I remember, and I started devouring it because for 4.5 years in concentration camp, I had no sweets, and I was trying to eat it in a hurry so I wouldn't lose it, but he told me I'll get sick. So I stopped eating it, and after a while, they left, and we found a place that was empty in a little farm town, and we stayed there and constantly ate and tried to get civilized a little. I, being of a young age, I was very naive. As I remember, I was about 7 or 8 or 9 years old. The Germans did not allow any Jew to go to school. So I had a limited amount of education. I don't remember how much. So we were in that little farm town for quite a while, just eating and trying to find out what's happening. After a while, my brother found somebody who told him that the city of Schwandorf is a short distance away, and there is a hall that there's some survivors from other camps are there. So we went there, and we arrived, and we stayed with them. After a while, the American UNRWA provided us with food, and the Jewish organization joined, gave us some clothes, and we stayed there for, I don't remember how long. And one day we found there was a German widow who needed somebody to cut wood and keep the place going because it was heated with wood and stove was cooked with wood. So we went over to see her, and she said yes, and she let us stay in the house. We stayed in that house, and I cut wood and so forth. Then my brother found out that some people, Jewish people, went back to Poland to search family. My brother went back to our hometown and arrived at the house. There was no furniture, no nothing, and no family. And while he was gone, I dreamt and I yearned that I came home. My family was intact, and I was the youngest one arriving, and they were so excited. But when my brother came back and told me, there's no survivors, nobody survived, I developed a meds, I developed a craze, I was developing a hate that I couldn't stand. I constantly was thinking, where can I get a gun and go and shoot the people that destroyed my family? For days, I hated. Till something came up to my mind and says, Nate, if you keep on hating, like the haters, you destroy yourself. From there on, I decided I will not hate. I don't hate, but I'll never forget or forgive for what they did to my family. I decided for a while to go and learn a profession because I felt I'm going to go somewhere. I learned to be a steam molder. I graduated. Then after that, I learned to be a shoe upper maker. And after being in the city of Spandau, I was very inquisitive. I tried to learn. I tried to read anything. And I wanted to know the furthest country away from Europe is Australia. And after a while, I found out there were some Jewish people from the city that went to Israel, but the British people wouldn't allow them, so they were sent to Cyprus. So after a while, I decided since I can't go to Israel, I signed up with the Australian government. For 2 years, I will work wherever they want me to. They only allowed 10% of Jews to go to Australia. So when we were on a ship, there were 980 people, 10 Jewish people, the rest of them were Nazis, SS people. Most of them, I knew they were SS people. The Australian government was so anxious to receive population because they only had 9 million people in a large country. So they didn't care who, as long as they were able and capable of working and doing something, they took. But they restricted the Jewish population. I went to Australia. I was designated to work in the Australian Army as a cook. I worked there for people who worked there, people of different nationalities. We stayed in barracks. After living in the camp for a period of time, I received a letter from my brother-in-law that I have a brother who left to Argentina when I was a very young kid, maybe 3 or 4 months. I didn't know him. So he wrote me that he has his address, and I got in touch with him. And I found out that he was destitute, he was poor and sickly. I received $7 a week. So every 2 weeks, I send him $7 in a letter. And I worked there for 1 year. My main objective was to learn English, and I constantly mingled around the soldiers, the Australian soldiers. I found one Australian sergeant who was very compassionate, so I tried and hung around with him for quite a while if I didn't work. And he asked me, while I keep my uniform from the camp, and I had other artifacts that I was a witness in Dachau against the SS people that I took, which were people that were killed and shot and hung and so forth, that the SS people had kept. And I had that, and he told me, don't keep that, because it will be a reminder for the rest of your life. I will keep it for you. I gave it to him. After a while, I keep in touch with my brother. And then I received a letter from my brother who I left behind in Schwandorf, that he was married, had a child, and he left and he lived in the United States. So I got in touch with him, and I corresponded with him for quite a while. After a while, I became an Australian citizen. I remember like today when the judge says, "Do you want to be an Australian citizen? Raise your hand." I raised both hands. I was so happy to be a citizen of Australia. After 5 years, I was working at different places. I was a chef at the Christian Brother College in Sydney. I worked there for 2 years. After completing that, I did various jobs, and I kept in touch with my brother. And one day he wrote me that he constantly had nightmares, that the people are chasing him, the SS, and he can't sleep. And he developed emotional problems. And finally he decided to write me that I should come and be with him because he's afraid to be alone. Even his wife was with him. So I decided to go to the American consul and applied for a visa. The United States of America does not recognize the country of citizenship, but the country of origin. The country of origin was Poland, so I had to wait 5 years to get a visa to the United States. By then, I did the different things, different jobs. And progressively, I received more sad letters from my brother, and he was sick, and then he had problems. One day I remember I was in Sydney and I was walking down by myself and I said, "Oh my God, is it all worth it? Is survival worth it? No family, no language, no money, no nothing." And something came up to me and it said, "Nate, after clouds, there's sunshine." And I stopped and I was thinking about it. And then I received a call from the United States consul that my visa is there. And I left for the United States and I met my brother. He lived in Racine and he had big emotional problems. He was in the hospital in and out. His wife left him and I was with him and taking care of him. He died at a very young age. And I moved from Racine to Milwaukee, where I met my wife. And I have 2 sons and a daughter. There's the sunshine. If it wasn't for my family, who I adore, life would be meaningless. I have the greatest family in the world. I love them dearly. I found out through the course of my life there's nobody more important in your life than your family. If you have good news or bad news, your family is always with you. The next important person in your world is your teacher, which I miss both of them. Because without family and teacher, we wouldn't be around. There would be no sense in being around. So I miss the teachers and the family greatly. After a period of time, I received a letter. No, I received a call from my son. I was 65 years old, and told me that he found the address of my brother again in Argentina. And he bought tickets for my wife and I and himself. And we left for Argentina. We arrived in Argentina. I met my brother for the first time in my life. I didn't know how to act. The only thing I remember saying to him, because we couldn't communicate, he spoke Spanish and Yiddish. He couldn't speak Jewish too much, neither could I very well. But somehow we got together, and I told him, our Mother in heaven must be happy to see us both together, that we're here. While being in Argentina, he was telling me there was a lady that was with my sisters, and he told him the German SS people took him over a bridge by train and pushed them all into the river and drowned them. She was the only one that could swim, and she saw my sister's picture floating on a document, and she took it, and she knew that he was in Argentina. She gave it to him, and I have it. I came to Milwaukee. I found out my brother-in-law lived in Chicago, and I found out, he told me what happened. My sister and her son were sent to Treblinka, and they were gassed. He told me my father and mother were shot in the town of Ghetto. He went to a labor camp, survived. And after a period of time, my son provided me with quite a lot of trips to go different places, and we decided to go, and being retired by that time, I went to different countries. And by going to different countries, I came to the conclusion there is no other country in the world like the United States of America. We have people from different nationalities and different religion. We don't know who to hate first, so we don't hate anybody. We live in a country that fights wars to give people liberty, not for land, to give them democracy, to give them freedom of speech. Unfortunately, a lot of those countries don't take advantage of it. This country is a country that people die and kill themselves to come here. My next country that I adore is the state of Israel. The state of Israel surrounded by enemies. And because of the strength of the Israel government and the Israeli people, we Jews are not going to gas chambers anymore. The state of Israel will protect us. God bless both countries. Thank you.
I would like, if you allow me, to ask Nate the first question. Every survivor has a personal, individual story. Every survivor also tells the story in a different way. I felt, and I have to admit this is the first time I hear Nate's story. I came on this job about 11 months ago. I felt that in a way when you tell the story, to some extent you relive it. That this is a very difficult experience for you, to come and tell the story. That it's not something that's easy for you to do. I wanted to ask you, what is your motivation? What motivates you to be so active for both the Holocaust Center and for the Jewish community? And spend, I would say, you probably spend once a week, right, when you are here. What motivates you to come to the schools and share your story with the students?
First, the biggest thing that I decided that I'll do, speak about the Holocaust, what happened to my family, and that was my commitment. I haven't talked to people about the Holocaust or my children until they were adults. After they got to be adults, we went back to search our roots. We went back to Europe, and we went back to concentration camps in my hometown. And after a while, I couldn't bear it anymore. We came back. There are days when I drive a car long distance by myself, and I say to myself, how people could live, how people could be possibly capable, knowingly, that they go into the gas chambers exist, including my family, and I cry. They were human beings. They knew the destiny, how they felt that they're going to be killed. I will speak as long as I can. I spoke in all over the country. I spoke Philadelphia, I spoke in all different places. Not every speech is the same. Not everything comes to me at once a time, you know. It's an emotional occasion for me, but I'm committed to do it. So you know, this is a history that it existed. You always might be wondering, why Jews? There were no other people in Europe. There was a minority that they were so easy to destruct, to destroy, and take their properties. And a lot of the people took advantage and took everything possible. And they, as soon as they liquidated Radamish, they ran and took everything from our house, I was told by people in Radamish. Jews were the only people that they could pick on because they were defenseless. So if you have any questions, please ask me and I'll be willing to answer you.
Why were you so committed to trying so hard at the camps?
You either did or you were killed. Nobody could escape with not doing anything. You were driven to work, to live. I'd just like to make one statement to young people here. Take advantage of all education that you can possibly get. Because more education you obtain, the more doors are going to be open for you in the future. You can be what you want to be. You have an opportunity to learn and be capable of being a president of the United States one day. If you want to see my tattoo, or if you want to talk to me, I am available for you. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Okay, 1, 2.